Yeah, he's just a great person.
Yep.
519 and 701 are those
Yeah.
just
All
correct?
right. Yeah. We'll call this meeting to order. It's 5:30.
Like right before their
Joan,
meeting last.
roll call, please, Joan.
Director
Called him like,
Kursvich?
hey, I'm running late.
Here. Director Hocker? Here. Director Kelsenberg?
Here.
Director Lauer?
Here.
Director Parker?
Here.
Director Thelander?
Here.
Chair Sherman?
Here.
You have a quorum.
Great. Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Move on to our consent, or our approval of tonight's agenda. Can I get a motion to approve? So move. Great. Director Hocker, and I saw Pete's
Second.
hand up.
Yep.
Director Kelsenberg with a second. All those in favor of approving tonight's agenda, raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Opposed? Agenda passes unanimously. Then Joan has our consent agenda for the evening up. Items A, B, and C. Is there a motion for the consent agenda?
So moved.
Great. Director Thelander makes the motion to approve consent. Is there a second?
Second.
Director Lauer with the second.
Can I make a comment quick?
Yes.
So 519 and 701, those are just minor modifications to a current policy. That's why we're not going through the whole first reading, second reading, and,
Yep.
okay.
Good to know.
Okay.
Okay. All those in favor of approving consent, raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Opposed? Consent passes. We have, under our strategic direction A, ensure the learning process is adaptable to meet individual student needs. We have the principal of Lily Lake Elementary. Is it Granza? Principal Granza is here, so come on up. Sit right here. And just for background on this, this is kind of a series we've been having in study sessions where we're inviting the principals of our buildings to come up and give the board just kind of a state of their school at a high level to try to hopefully educate the board a little bit about the buildings and some of the challenges and opportunities, strengths that exist. So we'll continue that, and we feel very lucky, new to the district. So welcome to.
Can we have him give us a little bit about his background?
Yeah,
So-
absolutely. Yes.
Lucky guy.
Thank you, Superintendent Funk. Chair Sherman, directors of the board, thank you for having me here tonight. It is a pleasure to be at Lily Lake Elementary. This is, as you said, my first year here with Stillwater. For the past 15 years, I've served as a superintendent in Minnesota schools, was principal and elementary teacher long before that. This is my 31st year in education. For me, it is a journey back to the job that I loved most. Every time I worked with an elementary principal and did some building visits, I didn't want to leave. I wanted to say, oh, move over, let me do this. And so I'm getting that opportunity to spend time with children and families and teachers once again, and I've very much enjoyed being back.
Great. Well, we're lucky to have someone like you here, so
Well,
thank you.
In case I have a heart attack, he's right there.
Yeah. Dr. Funk and I have known each other for quite some time. All right, Lily Lake Elementary. Tonight I'm going to be talking about our school. Oh, and I have the clicker. Just kind of about our general population. You can see compared to the districts, our percentage of free and reduced price lunch is a little bit higher than the average school. Our multilingual learners are a little below. Our special education numbers, 29%, are considerably higher than the rest of the district. That is because we house the communication integration program in the school, which increases our percentage.
Can you explain what that is that going to,
Yep.
you will get into
I
that.
will.
Okay.
I'll get there. And our students of color were slightly below the average for the district. This year, we have 387 students. Last year, I believe it was 417, according to the report card. So 387 is not according to the report card, but actual numbers this year. Our kindergarten is down to 2 sections this year, which is where that difference is sitting. Just as a point of interest for next year, we have about 60 signed up, so we should be heading towards that 3 sections again. Capacity of the school is set at 525. That has been adjusted for those dedicated communication integration program rooms because there are typically 7 to 10 students per room for that program, so that decreases the capacity of the building. If we were to take on further classrooms, that would decrease the overall capacity of the school if we took on more communication integration program classrooms. Today I'm going to talk about some of our strengths and challenges and opportunities, our staff, our families, the location, the CIP program as we call it, our focus on inclusion, as well as some of the challenges of the building and some of our staffing. To start off with, I will say that we have an incredible staff. Many of our staff members have been at Lily Lake for decades, and others have been there a few years. It's this wonderful mix of experience and energy, and the focus on working as a team is evident as you go from room to room in our school. Very often at a grade level, when you go from room to room, which I do every single day, you see almost exactly the same lesson. They're using the same language, asking the same questions, which tells me that we are implementing our curriculum with fidelity and that we have a guaranteed curriculum in our school that people will have very similar experiences no matter what classroom they're in. They're also very dedicated to making data-driven decisions. They work closely as a team. They look at their student data, which you'll see the evidence of when we get to our achievement data. We also have very supportive families. We have a very active PTO. Thank you for honoring them in last month's meeting. They were very excited to come back, although she came back and said, "Oh, I was so scared I couldn't say anything." They have monthly meetings. Unfortunately, they're the same night as your study session, so it's going on right now. So I got a pass for tonight. They have many special events. This month being I Love to Read Month. They have a lot of events planned, and there's Bigfoot pictures all around the school with my face on them because the school read aloud this month is Bigfoot and Littlefoot. We have a lot of community partnerships. We have many businesses that support our school, and our families in turn support those businesses. So we have Culver's Night and DQ Night and Giovanni's Night, and there's always something going on, and those businesses are giving back to our school. In turn, our PTO supports our students in our classrooms. They fund our field trips for the most part. Those buses are pretty expensive for field trips, so without their help, we wouldn't be able to take as many of those trips. Every year, they give our teachers some budget for those special requests that they have for their classroom that maybe wouldn't fit into their own budget or that they might buy on their own. And then they have budget enhancements for classrooms and our specialists. It's all about location, right? Just like in real estate, our school is in an amazing place. It is surrounded by gardens and green space, and our classes love to meet outside. We have kind of a courtyard in the middle, and we just put in a pollinator garden in the fall. And you can see on the top right there, one of our classes out sitting under a tree on one of those nice fall days. I think they were just doing their math out there. Gaga Ball is in the bottom right corner. I don't know if you know about Gaga Ball, but it is certainly a passion. Our communication integration program is such an amazing space. A lot of it has to do with our staff. We have highly educated, highly experienced staff in our program, and they know exactly the elements our students need. It is quite common for students to become dysregulated in our program, and they are very good at teaching strategies and techniques. One of the things our students do is they create a strategy of the week, and they create a video of how to calm yourself. And we show them all throughout the school, and all of our students can be seen taking a dragon breath when they get upset. So that program has wraparound services, speech therapy, occupational therapy, adaptive phy-ed, assistive communication, which on the bottom right, there's a wall of Velcro patches for their communication devices. So whenever they're doing new vocabulary words, they enter them into the communication devices, and they're picking up that new vocabulary and able to use it immediately. And then special social skills goals for our students as well. They take some community field trips. Just last week, they went to Perkins, talked about how to handle having a meal in a public space, manners, and how to operate and all of that. The program also gives us a special focus on inclusion throughout the school because many of our students spend time in our general classrooms as well as our special ed classrooms, and our students have developed an amazing compassion and empathy for our students, and they're so helpful of each other and so accepting, and they know the cues when students might be dysregulated or uncomfortable. They know how to support each other and the phrases that they can use to help them calm themselves or to comfort them, and it's just amazing to see. Makes me very proud to be an educator. And of course, there's me with my Dude Be Kind t-shirt. When it comes to achievement, we are proud of the direction that Lily Lake is taking. You can see along with the state and the district that we took a dip during COVID, but we are making some rapid progress back. I say that is greatly due to the district's efforts with our school-wide intervention team meetings and our district-wide intervention team meetings. And the interventionists at Lily Lake are amazing. They work closely with our teams. We make sure that we are implementing interventions with fidelity and tracking that data and returning to that data and giving students exactly what they need in their area of deficits and stretching them where they're able to be stretched. And I think our trajectory is headed in the right direction, both for reading and math. We just had our school-wide intervention meetings with all our grade levels going over winter data, and every grade level made progress. And the joy on the teachers' faces, and maybe a little bit of relief, like, oh, all this work is paying off, and we're seeing growth for our students. On to opportunities for growth. Our facility, as beautiful as it is a mix. So the pictures with the red frames are spaces that have been refurbished, remodeled in the school, and the areas with black frames are areas that are still waiting to be remodeled. And so, as I mentioned, we have 2 kindergartens this year, and both of those rooms have been refurbished. But the 3rd room that we will be using, hopefully, next year is not refurbished yet. So we have a difference in equity of those classrooms and just the general feel of the classroom, but also the fixtures. The bathrooms, the unremodeled bathrooms aren't quite, I don't know, welcoming. So we are looking forward to remodeling in the future. I know that it was in the plans for this summer originally, but with the construction of the new buildings, it was a little too much to take on. And so we're taking a year off and looking forward to continuing the progress on the building in the following summer. And then, as you've heard from many others, I'm sure, are the open positions. I can tell you that that is not just a Lily Lake problem, and it's not just a Stillwater problem. It's a general problem in all across Minnesota, if not the country. What I would call entry-level positions are very hard to fill because there are plenty of competitive alternative positions in private sector or business sector. And so being a paraprofessional or a paraeducator, depending on preference of terms, is a very important job. And I can say it's a difficult job. And one of our most important positions, they are the people who give our students exactly what they need when they need it to be successful. They calm them when they're upset. They encourage them when they're discouraged. They get them on the bus. They take them off the bus. They take them to lunch. They take them to recess. And for many students, that's their person. And to have highly qualified, effective people in these positions is very important. Right now, we have an opening in our communications integration program and a general classroom position. So if you know anybody looking for a position, send them my way, not the other schools. Send them my way. That's not fair, is it? Sorry. So in summary, Lily Lake has a lot to celebrate. It's a really special place with a positive climate, focus on academic excellence, surrounded by green space, and we have some challenges, just like many other places.
Great.
And that's it.
Thank you very much. That was a very nice summary. Thank you. I appreciate that. At this time, board members, questions, comments for principal?
Sure.
Yeah.
What's your special ed again over there? Like, are some of our different elementary schools have different types of special ed? And yours is what again?
It is the communication integration program. The focus is on students with autism.
Okay, and do they come from throughout the district there?
They do.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Anyone else? Yes, we'll go.
Okay. Question about the staffing for, well, particularly the CIP program.
Yes.
Are you seeing much turnover in our staff, particularly with that program, or do we generally hang on to our people? It sounds like we are hanging on to them, but maybe just life happens and we lost somebody.
Many of our staff in the program, both teachers and paraprofessionals, have been there for quite some time.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
of
So-
course, I've only been there since July, but from what I know,
You haven't driven anyone out yet.
Yes. Okay. Well, I guess
they
that's good.
have a lot of experience and they've worked together for a long time.
Great. Yep. Thanks.
Dr. Thielander.
Well, thank you again for being here, and it's great to have you here in Stillwater, and thank you for choosing us. So, I guess one has been, a common theme that I've seen in some of the other presentations has been around the green room. Can you just share or shed some light on what is kind of the approach that is taken by you in Lily Lake?
Yeah. So our green room, like other green rooms, is used mostly proactively for those students who just need to get some wiggles out or recognize. One of my big focuses is helping students who have a tendency to be dysregulated is to start recognizing their body's messages to them. Like, I realize that I'm breathing hard, or my heart rate is going, or I'm feeling tense, or my face is feeling angry, and recognizing those signs. And instead of becoming dysregulated, getting the power to recognize when it's going to happen and say, I need to go to the green room and work this out. So it's another way of being proactive, but it's also teaching a skill for those students that they can use well into the future. There are times that if a student is dysregulated, a teacher might ask them to take a break, which is more responsive. So that's how we use it. However, with the CIP program in the building, we have additional motor spaces. So the green room isn't our only option for that motor break. Students may go to the motor room with our OT or with adaptive FIAD. So we have multiple spaces that we use in that way as well.
Any other questions? Yes.
Thanks again for being able to reiterate what Andrew said. We appreciate you choosing us, so thanks a lot for that. Talking about the CIP program, we talked a little bit about what those classes size. You said there's 8 to 10 students potentially per room, potentially. What does that staffing look like? And maybe just walk us through what that looks like a little bit.
It depends on the room. Most of the rooms have a teacher and at least 2 paras. Some of them have 3, depending on the level of age and the level of need of the students. So we have a kindergarten room, and that room has 3 paras because, well, they're 5-year-olds, and they're just learning on their journey to find that regulation. We have another classroom that has 11 students. These students are older students, more capable of self-regulation, and that room could have 1 para or 2 paras, depending on the time of day. And then there's other classrooms that have pretty high-level need students, and so they might have 6 or 7 students with 1 adult and or 1 teacher and 2 paras.
Awesome. Thank you very much for that.
I have more of a comment. Going back to the slide where you talk about the focus on inclusion with our CIP program being integrated into the regular ed classroom, I really just am so proud that we do that. I know that that's a theme across our schools, is to really integrate all of our children to make sure kids see the differences in our community. So I just wanted to call that out and say that's such a cool thing that we do. And then kind of a second thing that I'm impressed by is the use of data by our teachers and the real teamwork that is happening. Can you remind me, is Lily Lake a bar school or is it not a bar school? It is not. So it sounded very much like you guys were a bar school with the use of data and kind of teamwork across the different classrooms in the same grade level. So I appreciate that work, and it looks like our scores in that school are on the right trajectory. So I appreciate learning all this. Doing a great job. Thank you.
It was all Mr. Cox before me.
Yeah, I know Mr. Cox is really good too.
Yes, Director Thielander.
So, not often I think we have a principal come in with such a depth of experience and kind of bringing a different lens and serving the roles that you have. Would you just kind of mind just sharing what maybe excites you from what you have seen in your experience about Stillwater schools and what kind of really brought you here?
I'm really impressed with the school-wide integration or school-wide intervention meetings and the district-wide intervention meetings and how our interventionists are being used and our coaches are being used. I think that alone is encouraging this focus on data and the application of data. But it's really giving teachers the tools that they have been hungry for. So for so long our teachers have heard, well, just meet their needs, but didn't have the tools or the training or the time cut out for them to really do that work. The district's plan for that has done exactly that, has given the teachers the time to meet, saying, here's the intervention tool, here's how to use it, and here's who you should use it with. You're going to use it for this long, we're going to measure data, we're going to come back, we're going to look at that data, and if it's not working, we're going to try something else. If it has worked, they can go back to so it just gives the structure that we need to really provide that individualized attention for our students. That, to me, is what every district is striving to do. There's lots of districts who have PLCs. There's lots of districts who have QComp. But there are very few who have organized that in a way that really supports teachers and gives them what they need to be successful. And I think that Stillwater's data is showing that that is exactly what we need to be doing. So, nice job, Dr. Funk.
Yeah, right. 2 years, that's it, all it took. Nice job to your staff.
Yes.
To build on Director Hockert's question, and sorry, I think I referred to you as Andrew early, sorry, Director Theander.
It's all good.
On the use of data and then the follow-up from the question that you just answered about tools that are available, can you give some just examples of what that data looks like? Because I was under the same assumption that I assumed it was bar data. So can you talk about what data you're actually using in that process, and then some of the tools or interventions that you mentioned that said the tools are available? What are they?
So, an example would be Haggerty for our reading instruction. It's really focused on phonics, phonemic awareness, nonsense words, if you will, kind of like a flip chart. Letters change. They may not necessarily be words, but they're using to learn the letter sounds, even if it's a made-up word. And so teachers will work with students with these tools like Haggerty, like UFly, nonsense words, different activities, different tools that we've taught them, and that they are collecting data on students. So they might meet with a student for the next 3 weeks. We're going to meet in small group 3 times a week or 2 times a week, whatever it is, and they'll keep data on how many words they're getting correct, are they improving, and then that is entered into spreadsheets, creates graphs, so that when our PLCs come together, we can see, okay, if they continue on this trajectory, they're going to make that 40% mark by spring, which is where we want them to be, or the 60% mark. And if they're not making progress on that, we say, okay, now we're going to step away from the classroom. You're going to go have some dedicated time with the interventionist. So that's the next level of intervention. And then maybe we'll see some progress. They'll go back to the classroom. So it's just using local classroom data from their activities, their own assignment scores, the data that they're collecting, live time.
Thank you very much.
And this is maybe more of a superintendent question, although you might have some perspective, just so I'm clear. So when I think of BAR and everything we've learned, that to me, the building assets, reducing risks, is that more of like the behavioral relational piece versus the data is consistent, that the assessments, the data that is being pulled in for meetings and touch bases, that's consistent?
Yeah, I think BAR is more social, emotional. How are we meeting the students' needs in that regard? And what we're talking about with Principal Grunseth is more of a collaborative action team, academic data.
Right.
You know, he talked about the teachers using different assessments internally in class, and then at the district level or at the building level, we use FastBridge, and I think we'll be providing the board an update on, and I think that's what you're alluding to earlier was your FastBridge results. You know, sometime in the next month here, we'll give you an update on where we're at as a district with FastBridge from our fall to winter assessments. And so one of the areas of focus for the district, particularly this year, has been training our administrators in analyzing FastBridge data and working with our staff on that, and then working with our, really our assessment person, Elsa, to, okay, tell us what's the data showing us. And so I think that's a bit different than what we've been doing historically.
And I just wanted to make that clear, especially because we have new board directors, that the BAR is more on the social emotional, so thank you for confirming that. The data perspective that we're utilizing, student achievement data,
Right,
is
we're looking at different
consistent.
sets of data. One student achievement, one is more behavioral needs.
Okay. And I know you don't miss what you've never had, but do you ever get to see what the BAR schools have? Do you have an interest? Does your team have an interest in becoming a BAR school? Do you feel, like, I guess, how does the social emotional side work in your school from your perspective now?
I don't know enough about the elementary level of BAR. I've worked with BAR in the past, but at the high school level.
Okay.
And so it's kind of a different focus. I think of it as like our PLCs, the work that we do is MTSS, multi-tiered system of support. It's that triangle where you want the base. And then I look at BAR, it's creating not just a triangle, but a pyramid. So if you turn the turn the pyramid, it's the same for behavioral and social emotional. So you have a kind of a three-dimensional model, if you will. I think that we do a lot of that work already within
Yeah.
our Community Connect meetings. We talk about all of the aspects of students' needs and strengths already. I don't know what the interest would be at the staff level.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other questions? I really appreciate this, and Kate, I mean, every director pretty much covered everything I had, but I think the word from a board standpoint that I was really drawn to in everything you said was just the fidelity piece, because we know if the same things are being taught with fidelity, we will see those results, and I think that you're living proof of that right now. So I thank you for the presentation, and thank you to your staff who does amazing work, and to the families that support the school, the local businesses. We're excited to have you in Stillwater, and thank you for coming tonight. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you
Thank
for the
you.
opportunity.
All right. Moving on, we're going to go to Strategic Direction C, which is utilize systems and align resources in an efficient manner to support student learning. It's a pretty rich discussion on policies tonight. Our first policy, so we'll bring Paul up, is our first reading for policies 505 first, is the distribution of non-school sponsored materials on school premises by students and employees.
Yes, good evening, Chair Sherman and members of the board. As we said, we're going to take a look at two policies tonight for your consideration. Both of them are first readings, so it's an opportunity to take a look at the policies, and then there's an opportunity for reflection and any kind of community input between now and the next, probably the next board meeting to do that, and then take a look at it for a second reading, and then you have an opportunity to kind of make some choices and decisions at that point. So we'll start with 505, which, as mentioned, the distribution of non-school sponsored materials on school premises by students and employees. This is an MSBA model policy, and as a committee, we've had a focus on looking at the MSB recommended policies for the district. This is a policy that we don't have currently in our set of policies, so it would be a new policy for the district. It does not necessarily contain, it's not a mandatory policy, and it does not contain necessarily legal requirements within it, but it is recommended by MSBA. It was just to be beyond the committee looking at this as a potential policy to bring into the district. We did have several principals in the district take a look at it as well, just to see if this was something that they had interest or need or felt it would enhance our policy and our ability to manage some of the situations within schools. And they all agreed that this is something that they would like the board to consider as a area of policy. So with that in mind, the purpose of this policy is to protect and exercise students and employees' free speech rights, taking into consideration the educational objectives and responsibilities of the school district. It has two kind of main areas of, as far as a general statement. And this would be that the school district recognizes that students and employees have the right to express themselves on school property. This protection includes the right to distribute at a reasonable time and place and in a reasonable manner non-school sponsored material. And that goes on to protect First Amendment rights while at the same time preserving the integrity of the educational objectives and responsibilities of the school district. The school board adopts the following regulations and procedures regarding distribution of non-school sponsored material on school property and at school activities. So if you look, and you'll have an opportunity to, if you look through the policy, it does go through a set of definitions that are pretty straightforward, I think, as far as the language goes. It defines distribution, what non-school sponsored material is, and it's not things that would be part of a curriculum or part of a school official materials. This is non-school sponsored. It defines what obscene means, to minors, what minors mean, what a material or substantial disruption, what that would be defined as, what a school activity is, and what libelous means within a definition. As far as guidelines, I think the next section in section 4, just to highlight, I think, kind of some of the meat of the policy really falls under Part B under guidelines, and that's that requests for distribution of non-school sponsored material will be reviewed by administration on a case-by-case basis. However, the distribution of materials listed below is always prohibited, so this is a line that wouldn't be crossed. And those would include material is prohibited that is obscene to minors, is libelous or slanderous, is pervasively indecent or vulgar, advertises or promotes any product or service not permitted to minors by law, anything that would advocate violence or other illegal conduct, anything that would constitute insulting or fighting words, the very expression of which injures or harasses other people, and others that would present a clear or present likelihood that the material would substantially disrupt the proper and orderly operation of the school and the school activities. There's a clause under number 2 that there's also a decision regarding reasonable time and place and manner in which materials would be distributed, and it outlines some some specifics regarding that. I think the other part that I would just highlight is, on section 6 that talks about disciplinary action, and really the basis of that, it's any kind of discipline regarding any of these areas of the policy would just be consistent and in accordance with the school district's student discipline policy. So it would be consistent with that as far as how issues that might come up would be addressed by the administration. So I think that provides a kind of a highlight of the policy. So we can...
And I would, I guess I would just say, because I know Director Thielander had sent some emails, and one thing just to note would be under section 3, under definitions A, just to draw the board attention to, this is also like posting. It's not just, materials that you would be handing out. So for students and staff, it would include posting as well. One thing I noticed, Paul, and I just want to vocalize it here under 7. Do we post this in school buildings? We might just want to get rid of that part. There's one sentence. Copy of this policy will be published in student handbooks and posted in school buildings. I would imagine that we need to delete that, so just to.
Sure, yep.
I'll make note of it for our next policy meeting.
Yeah,
but.
thank you.
And I do appreciate that you bringing up that the principals are asked, because I want the board to know that our approach, I feel like, is much more collaborative with staff, and this is evidence of that. Like, we're asking them what they need from the board to make their life easier, to maintain that, the academic and behavioral integrity in our buildings. So when they came, this was one of the ones that was 100%. Principals really wanted this for clarity in their buildings.
Correct.
So that they could look back, and they all have procedures for it, that they are doing this anyway, but and they all made very slightly, but they really wanted the procedure in place, or the policy in place. Seeing as this is a first read, feel free to, read it and send feedback. Yeah.
Yeah, and take this as a question to take away, or you can start the answer tonight as you would. But 2 questions that I would have on this would be, one is I don't know the status of our identity harm protocol. I saw in December we had the meeting on it, but I can't remember where that landed.
It's in place and active, so.
So I guess one question is, where does this line up with the identity harm protocol? If someone was coming in and presenting and sharing a flyer that someone else found offensive, but not meeting the qualifications in section B, that would potentially create a consideration where 2 policies are up against each other. So I'm curious how we would consider that.
I'm sorry, Parker, really quick, which section, Director Parker, where you said B, was that in the general statement of policy? or-
Guidelines, section 4B, he referred to section B as the area that really had a lot of the meat of
Thank
this,
you.
which 4B does seem to be where the meat of this is. Obscene to minor, libelous, anything in that category seems like if it's not in that fall in one of those categories, it would be okay. Which seems like there are some categories of overlap of what's okayed by this that might cause some consternation on our identity harm protocol. So that's question one to think about. And then second is there a power differential between a student handing something out or posting something and a teacher handing something out and posting something? And should that be considered, should there be a different policy, or should those entities be treated differently? I don't know, I guess that's a question I would ask to look into, because of the power differential of a person, the teacher or staff.
We'll bring those
Yeah,
back to
certainly
the
those, yeah,
committee.
it could be looked at, and I think looking closely at the, you know, the real specific wording to see if there would be any conflict between if it's a teacher and a student in a situation. So I think that would be a good thing to look at.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments for the committee to take back? Great. And don't feel limited to here. We'll meet again with policy and take these up, but if you have anything else, feel free to email Mr. Lee and copy Mike, Superintendent Funk. Great.
Okay, wonderful.
Thank you very much, and stick around. Our next is first reading for policy 524.5, personal electronic communication devices. Before I let Director Lee start here, I'm going to ask that, just for the community, we've been having a lot of conversation about this topic for a while now. This is a legislative requirement that by March 15th, we adopt a policy for our district related to personal technology. We've had different study sessions with guest speakers and some conversations. So today what the policy committee is looking for is for a direction on the general policy. So you'll look, and I think I had sent an email, we have kind of an option 1 and an option 2, which Paul will get into with us. But today I just want to have a real conversation about where we're all landing now that we've kind of looked at the survey results, the feedback results, and the listened to our guest speakers, read the books, and I know we're all following this issue closely. So we'll turn it over to you, and then we'll have a discussion.
Sure. Yes, thank you. And as a first reading, taking a lot of that information in the statute requirements and then putting it in a policy. So some of this certainly meets that statutory requirements that we need as a district. We did look at this there's would be a couple different options, but what we're presenting tonight is a standalone policy just specific to this area and concern. And you will see if you go look at the end of the policy, you'll see a lot of references and where this is referenced to different statutes and to different policies that we have in place. But it does fit nice, and there's certainly a component of this that is unique to this particular policy. So I'll kind of go through it just to highlight some of the areas, and some of it's just more of the statutory components of it. But then, as Chair Sherman said, I think that the real discussion point is here in the middle of the policy. That reflects a little bit of all the strong and really wonderful work that's been done to engage staff and community and students in looking at how we best support the learning for students. So the purpose, again, the purpose of this policy and the objective is to support the school district's focus on learning in alignment with the district's mission to ignite students' passion for learning, cultivate a strong foundation of knowledge, and foster a sense of community within our schools. Possession and use of personal electronic communication devices must be regulated to ensure that such devices do not disrupt or interfere with the education process or school operations, impair the safety, welfare, and privacy of students and staff, or are used as part of an act of academic dishonesty. So the general statement of the policy is to minimize the impact of personal electronic communication devices on student behavior, mental health, and academic attainment and to support the school environments in which students can engage fully with their classmates, their teachers, and instruction, the school board has determined the use of personal electronic communication devices by students during school hours should be limited. There's a set of definitions. Bell to bell, in this definition, means from the bell that starts the school day to the bell that dismisses students at the end of the school day. That's bell to bell. Cell phone really means cell phones. We'll get into a little probably more bigger definition here in a minute. Cyberbullying, this is consistent with what we have in our bullying policy and what that means. Instructional time means any structured or unstructured learning experiences that occur from when the first bell rings to the end of the school day. That's instructional time. And then we have the definition of personal electronic communication device, and that's what you're going to see used as the term. Kind of it replaces cell phone in this little broader definition. So what that means is any personal device capable of connecting to a cell phone, the internet, a cellular or Wi-Fi network, or directly connect to another similar device. Personal electronic communication devices may include cell phones, wearable devices such as smartwatches, personal headphones, earbuds, laptop tablets, virtual reality devices, and other personal electronic communication devices with the above-mentioned characteristics. And then stored means just in which a way that those items would be stored. What that means, it's kind of out of sight. And there's probably some discussion regarding how the district might want to have procedures in place for the storage for that. I don't believe that our policy directly regulates that, but refers to the buildings and the administration making those determinations of how cell phones would be stored in a safe manner. So the section 4, personal electronic communication device use and storage. So this is broken down into the three different levels of our main educational programming. So part 1, in elementary schools, it reads, students are prohibited from using personal electronic communication devices on school premises from bell to bell, which includes but is not limited to instructional time, lunch periods, recess, school-sponsored programs, events, or activities, or any other time during the designated school day. All personal electronic communication devices shall be kept in designated areas and turned off. At the middle level, it's the same language. It's the bell to bell, and all personal electronic communication devices shall be kept in the designated area and turned off. When we move to the high school, this is where you see the two options for consideration by the board. The first is the same. It's the bell to bell, the exact same language as the other two levels. Option 2 reads as follows. Students are prohibited from using personal electronic communication devices during instructional time, which includes the entire period of a scheduled class and other times when students are directed to report to and participate in any instructional activity. Students may wear smart or electronic watches, but may not use any communication applications or features that are prohibited from use on other personal electronic communication devices, and all notifications must be turned off. All personal electronic communication devices shall be kept in designated areas and turned off during instructional time. Personal electronic communication devices may be used during passing times and lunch periods. However, such use is discouraged. And that's that component. Then the policy does go on to address off-campus and school-sponsored activities. And for that, the school administration may establish guidelines, and they may be particular to the activity or what that school-sponsored off-campus activity is. Then the limited use and storage of personal electronic communication devices. The limitations on the use of personal electronic communication devices again, this is kind of what we're kind of saying we
We
kind
need
of
your, yeah.
prohibit, right? And that's just anything that disrupts the educational environment, certainly cannot be used, and specifies in here, at any time in locker rooms, bathrooms, or other locations where the presence of such devices poses an unreasonable risk to the safety, welfare, or privacy of others. The devices are not allowed or prohibited to record or transmit or post audio, video, or photos of persons or persons on school grounds or on school buses without the express permission of school staff, in addition to with the express consent of the individuals that are subject to the recording. Certainly with, consistent with our other policies, cannot be used for any type of bullying or cyberbullying. And then it does on 5 indicate that personal electronic communication devices shall not be used during a lockdown drill, a fire drill, or a similar safety drill. Under section 6, there are a list of exceptions. And one of the main ones here is that a student may be allowed to use a personal communication device for the purpose as documented in a student's individualized education plan, or IEP, for students with disabilities, or under section 504, in accommodation for a student with a disability, or as part of a healthcare plan that we would have, which also acts as a 504 plan if someone's monitoring their medical condition or things like glucose levels and things like that. Again, a student may use electronic communication to report or respond to an emergency. And that kind of is the highlights there. And then there's just a little clause here on that the school district doesn't have the responsibility for devices that are brought to school, and as far as any kind of loss or damage or things that happen for those types of devices when they're on school property.
And I will say that depending on the direction the board provides to the committee, we need to kind of look at the whole policy through that lens. It was just getting difficult for the committee to really analyze the entire policy without getting the board's clear direction that it wants to take. Kind of philosophically at the high school, I think we were all kind of agreeing, it seemed like on the K through 8, and that maybe that we just needed to have some discussion on the board's feelings on the 9 through 12. So we have both of our students here, so this is where I would love for you to raise your hand and participate and just kind of engage in the discussion. Superintendent Funk is here to answer any questions or provide a perspective, as is, we're fortunate with Paul here for the student support services perspective as well. And I just want to be able to have a conversation where we can go back and forth and share perspectives and hopefully net out at the end with a clear-cut direction on the 9 through 12. Yes, Director Parker.
As one of the new board members, one of the things I'm curious about is how do we just heard a policy, we did a couple policies that minor updates that were just passed through. We just heard a policy that we talked to some principals on. In December, we went through a policy that had large community engagement. How do we decide, what was the process for this policy? And how do we decide which of the policies it goes through? Or which of the processes it goes through?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I think Carissa can address this policy specifically. Some of the other policies, so what we look at is MSBA rights model policies and their attorneys. So when little changes happen through a review of the policy by MSBA attorneys, and again, it's an organization that we pay into to have that expertise available to us. And something may change a little bit in statute, and so they might tweak a policy that we already have in place. They might change a little bit of wording or a reference. And so when it's a minor change, the committee will look at that and they may consider that to go on consent, because it really doesn't change any of the meanings behind. It's just kind of editing changes. So those are typically, when you see something come through consent, that's what that is. They'd be very minor, and if you would look, kind of in the document, you'd find maybe a line has changed. Then the policies that are updated but have substantial changes to them by MSBA. There are policies that we may have in place, but there's some major change. That's when the committee looks at those changes. We look at redlined, versions of it to look at that piece. And then that will be brought to the board for a first reading, a little more formal component of that. This one, and there are some, as I mentioned with 505 is one where we didn't have a policy on the books, but we looked at it as recommended by MSBA and looked
our
for.
principals.
Yep, and look for adoption, and that was one because we didn't even have anyone. We kind of reached out to principals for their input first, not first, but as part of the process to see, is this something that'd be helpful in your practice, just to get their perspective. The cell phone policy is different in that this is brand new to everything, so there's a much more robust process.
So there's multiple levels, one answer in that question. So a year and a half ago, we came to the school board with, I don't know, 6, 8, 10, 12 policies because state legislature came in and said, these new laws that we have passed, you need to update your policies. So we did that based upon legal ramifications if we didn't do it from the legislature. So that's one way of, okay, got to do it. The other thing is sometimes we will have curriculum-related policies. So instead of the policy committee necessarily being the lead on it, they'll get to it. We will have our district curriculum advisory committee, and they'll have members of the public there, and then they will weigh in on, okay, what they think that we should do. And then it goes through the process that way. This one is pretty unique because this is a state mandated. You got to have something in place by March 15th. And, if you were to look statewide, I think a number of districts just went and adopted something. And our board here took the commitment probably 6-9 months ago that, okay, we want to have a community input on it. And that's where we've got Carissa up here to talk about the process that we involved the community in here. So there's not necessarily one cookie cutter approach, but it's a great question because it's multifaceted and policies touch everything. The other thing I can say is, and Katie, you can help me out here, or Director Hockert there, how many policies in the last few years have we updated? Ballpark.
Oh, boy.
It's a lot.
Well, at last count last year, we were at like 46, which was way improved over like the 24 the year before and like the 20-ish the year before.
So one of the challenges I had when I came in here, we had policy on the books, I don't know, going back to the 1980s. I'm not sure if they went that far back.
70s.
So this is just an ongoing process, and so we're
And correct me if I'm wrong, Superintendent Funk, some we have to approve annually or every
Right.
2 years. So some you'll just see on consent because that's just a school board has to continually approve. So they might not ever have any changes, but it's required to have our eyes on it, so.
So I don't know if you want to talk through the process for this.
Yeah, I think the process with this one was really because this is a large topic with community interest, and because it was a new policy, we felt it was really important to hear from our students, from our staff, and from our families. So we had some conversation with the school board starting over the summer after this legislation was passed and talked about what our process might be. We did a little research, kind of checking out to see what other districts across the country were doing and what kind of impact it was having. We brought in a speaker to talk to you all about that. We put out some surveys to our students and our staff, and then we had an online community engagement tool that we used with our community. And that really just allowed us, I think, to get a good feel for what our community was in support of, but also to understand what are the concerns that they had, what are the questions. We felt it was important to be proactive so we didn't just have a policy and then learn afterwards why it might not work for people, but to find out on the front end what our community was looking for. And I think from the feedback that I shared with you, this policy, whether you go with the option 1 or 2, really does line up with what we heard from the community. As we shared, people are in agreement that phones shouldn't be used during instructional time. There was very few who felt like, yeah, kids should be on their phone the whole time they're in class. But the concern was that communication piece. I want to be able to reach out to my child, or that safety piece. So I think there are opportunities for us as a district to be able to handle that through different communication channels we provide, or through more of a limited access way. So I think this is really in line with what our community was asking for.
Thank you.
Addressing the safety bit, I think it would actually be more beneficial to not have phones during the school day for that purpose, because I feel as if parents get over communicated to in those issues, like when there's issues at school, and then there's anxiety and worry about that makes the situation more unsafe than it actually is. And also, not to be that person, but that we have not had cell phones for years before this, and schools ran just fine, so I don't think that should be the concern. Although Mason and I had talked to a large amount of students about their opinions and updating them with where we are in the cell phone policy now, and I think it was unanimous that everyone preferred just having their phone not on them during instructional time, because I have no idea. I think like students will find a way to have their phone regardless, and if you do the pouch or the designated area, then students will find like a magnet to unlock the pouches, or there'll always be something. If they want it, they'll get to it. And so I think prohibiting them during instructional time would be most beneficial, because they're not on their phone when they actually need to be learning and educated. But that's the feedback we've heard.
I could just add on a little bit. So to just add on, I think students' immediate response would be better to option 2. But I know Ainsley and I's personal opinion is kind of the option 1, bell to bell, just kind of gone for the day and just focus on learning and getting an education and just being engaged with school. And I think that would also improve our culture a little bit better, just the school culture. It just kind of feels down sometimes, and we just want to be more uplifting. And I think phones, when you walk into a classroom, I know we've talked about this before, when you walk into a classroom, it's just texting when your friend is right in front of you, or your classmates around you. And I think it could just improve our school's culture a little bit better as well.
One more thing on that, sorry. The culture aspect is a really big part, because this year, specifically Mason and I have noticed like a lack of student engagement in extracurricular activities, school events, and I think that removing phones from the situation would make students want to get more engaged in their community and kind of remove that online traction and move it more to in-person and like physical environment, and more enriching in that aspect.
That's great. Can I ask a follow-up to you guys?
Yeah.
Can you comment maybe on your thoughts on the mental health component from just a student perspective and the device? Because I know we see surveys that will indicate that there's escalating mental health in students that are your age in high school, yet they want to keep their cell phones. Is that a decision? I mean, what's your perspective on that?
Do you want to go?
Yeah. When we talked to our student council kind of about this, Ains and I are very like, this is going to be so much better for your mental health if it's just gone. You don't have to worry about it. It's put away. It's not there. But so many students, I think they don't realize that, we're all addicted to it. We all want to look at it. We all want to check it. And so they're like, no, like we have this self-restraint, but no, we don't. It's right there. We want to take it. We want to grab it. And so I think with having it put away, it's not there, I think our brains will refocus, school, learning, the teacher, the classroom, the environment, everything would just improve. And I think students need to understand that, and right now they don't, and they think that they have that self-control, but really at the end of the day, it's right there, it's easy access for them, they want to take it.
It's also the hyper involvement of being online. Like, you will see things that you don't want to see, and you have access to too much information online. I think that's what's most detrimental about cell phones, is the internet. You just know more than you need to. And taking that away, or having less time and less access to what everybody else is doing in the comparison aspect, I think would improve mental health in that regard.
I really enjoy just hearing and listening to your perspectives, so thank you, and continue to raise your hand and engage, as the directors talk here, and then also if you guys have questions for the students, feel free to speak up as well. Any other comments? Yeah, there you go.
I'll start with a question.
Yeah.
I was gonna ask this broadly, but I'll ask the students. Is you go into different classrooms, different teachers are gonna have different expectations of you and the phone. Have you experienced that?
Yes.
Enforcement is what's gonna be my operative word.
Yeah, that was one of the big topics during our discussions with our students was like, right now there's a practice of putting your phone in the full holder in the front of the room. And the biggest issue is there's a lack of enforcement across the board. And so certain teachers will use as like attendance, like Mr. Porman Mason's dad does it as attendance, like right when you walk in, you put your phone up there and it stays there the entire hour. Other teachers have it up there, but they don't enforce it, and so then people go on their phones. And so it is a good practice of teachers enforcing it, but I think it just needs to be more enforced for it to work correctly.
On that, so that was the question for the students, and then more broadly, does the enforcement need to be built into the policy, or is that up to you guys?
Up to us.
Okay.
I'll jump in. I really appreciate hearing from you ladies, especially giving the representative perspective for all your students. I think everything that you just said very much aligns with what we learned at our last meeting. There is definitely a disconnect between the many, many students who participated in our survey and their self-awareness of how much of an impact cell phones have on their own learning and what the adults are seeing, what the parents are seeing, and what the staff is seeing. If you look at the chart again, they're very clearly laid out. Students, not a problem. We can handle it. We have the self-control. And then parents and teachers especially saying, this is not working. This is a huge distraction. And the desire for consistent enforcement. Did you guys read the book, The Anxious Generation?
Yes, I'm about halfway through it right now.
Because stuff that you guys are bringing up is exactly what that book is really talking about. And that life existed before cell phones, and that our students haven't lived that life. It was before, their whole lives have been with cell phones. And they don't even recognize the impact that it is having living in an online world and in the real world, and having those two conflict. So for me, I very strongly believe that we need to give our students an opportunity to have that hard break during the day in a bell-to-bell. And really, I see it as an opportunity to change and shift the culture in our high school, at least to try. I know there's going to be ways around enforcement, and we're going to have to be dedicated to at least doing our best as the adults in the room to enforce it as best as we can. But just hopefully, it will shift kids into realizing that having those conversations in between classes and at lunchtime, having a loud lunchroom where kids are engaging with each other is what we want and what we are hoping for them. And that hopefully it'll carry over into other events as well. So after looking at the real wording in here and all the adjustments that staff, I very much appreciate, nobody realizes this, but staff did a ton of work this week. The actual independent policy, this one didn't come out till like the day before we met for our policy committee. So it was really down to the wire, and I really appreciate that you guys did all this work and added a bunch of stuff and changed it around for us, so that we can actually look at it tonight. So thank you for that work. So anyway, I will stop talking. I very much like the bell-to-bell, which is option 1. Yeah?
I mean, I guess I agree. I'm in favor of the option, the bell-to-bell, at least in practice. In theory, I'd rather it just be during instructional time, but I just don't think it's feasible. My only concern, really with the bell-to-bell is, and I don't know if that needs to be laid out in policy, but how those phones are retained is important, is an important thing to me. I want them, I don't want to collect them. I mean, I would rather they stay with the kid, going through the day. In a pouch, that's, I guess, that comes with a cost, and and comes with, they'll find a magnet and, to unlock them, and that'll happen.
Burner phones.
And then they'll have burner phones. And I mean, yeah, but I mean, the thing about all the ways around it is, well, then you deal with the people that find ways around it. It limits your pool, and it creates a uniform policy, and that's what's important. I mean, anecdotally, I talked to my own 15-year-old and said, can you see a world in which you don't have your phone all day? And he's like, well, I'd like to have it. But he said, as long as everybody else is in the same boat, then it isn't, then he could get there. And he's, fairly rational, so for a 15-year-old. So that was encouraging to me, because I mean, that said, part of the reason why I even asked him the question the way I asked it was because the day before I asked it, at 11 o'clock, he had sent me a text about a car that he had seen that he really thought we should buy. And I'm like, shouldn't you be learning something? He's like, yeah, but I'm done. I'm done. We're at the end of the class. Okay. So I can live without those texts in the middle of the day, and he could probably live without sending them. So yeah, but I guess I don't know how we, do we come to a decision about how the phones are carried before this gets done, or I don't know.
I think that the way the policy will work is the board is going to decide on the overall policy, the direction, and then we will turn it over to staff to work through the logistics, building by building. It might vary depending on middle school, elementary, high school. But I would expect, I think there's enough interest on the board when I'm talking to individual directors to be kept abreast of what those procedures
We'd
will be.
update you on what the procedures are.
Because there'll be a high attention to it, and we talked about that in policy, having them in, having the procedures being high visibility for families, for students. Board members would certainly get questions no matter what direction we decide, so we need to be able to be informed. So. Yes, Dr. Kelso.
Go ahead, I've already spoken.
Yep, that's all right, go ahead.
So you alluded to it, but the designated area, I think you suggested there's the thing on the back of the door used for attendance. Or is designated, is it always just right in the classroom as you walk in, a designated area, or is there some other definition?
I think that'll probably be procedural, and so that'll be after we decide on the direction, if we want to, have it be an instructional use. I think really what exists right now is kind of a pretty, maybe it's not codified in policy, but it's the option 2, which is to keep it out of the instructional time. But I think enforcement is lax, and I think our staff said that in the policy. It's hard to enforce. It's, you're taking it away and then giving it to them multiple times during the day, which really just is ripping that addiction away several times, which is hard on staff as much as it is on the student. So I guess that'll probably be in the policy or in the procedure. So how do you feel about option 1 and 2? Are you leaning one way? You?
Oh, me?
Yeah.
Do I have to
Since you
declare
raised
right
your
now?
hand? No, you don't have to. No, you don't have to.
I am not set on one
Okay,
or
okay,
the other, so
good,
I am
good to
still
know.
flexible, yes.
Okay, great. Any other comments from the board? You had your hand up?
Oh, did you? Okay. Kind of want to echo Director Lauer. This is something, especially, as a newer board member, that is challenging to sort of, set a policy without knowing exactly what that's going to mean in terms of how it plays out. And I know that that's just sort of the natural distinction between a governance board and the staff who's tasked with implementing. So I would say where I lean philosophically is definitely a bell to bell from K to 12. I don't think there are no solid arguments for needing cell phones during the school day. But a couple things, especially, in talking about kind of where the students are, to me that suggests that there are still some, needs to make sure we're communicating sensitively and thinking about those concerns that may come up from students and potentially parents. We know that phones don't make people safer, but there might be a perception that they do. And I think just recognizing that and being sensitive to it, especially there are a number of reasons why I think that's more important now than it even was a few months ago. So I want to make sure we're just considering that. And I think even from a cost perspective, I think it's something I'm trying to be cognizant of and sensitive to. So when we think about implementation, thinking about ways, how is this going to work if, certain things are going to cost a certain amount, and if those aren't an option, what are the other ways that we can really achieve this and make the policy sustainable and effective long term?
Yes, Park.
Can I lead off with a question before my comment? Awesome. So, talking about the IEPs in here, what percentage of our students are on IEPs at the high school, maybe, or district-wide? I don't really care which. And can you give an example potentially of what an IEP that would allow a cell phone usage and what an IEP that would not allow cell phone usage?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So it's about 17%, 17.5 of our students are students with disabilities.
Is 17 or 17.5?
I think it's actually 17.7, but close enough. Yeah. And so let's see, an example. There could be a student with another health disability, which is an area of disability that impacts their learning, that might be related to a seizure disorder, in which they might have an electronic device that I think they have the potential. I don't know if we have any students that have it, but that can read kind of the temperature of your body and the sweat glands, and it will give you a warning. So that would be an example. I think that there would have to be probably some discussion around kind of where we stand on procedures, and those kind of decisions, first of all, are made by the IP team, with some guidance. There may be students, we might get requests, put it that way, regarding students that have really high levels of anxiety that really impacts their learning. That could be a potential. I'm not sure that we'd have to kind of figure out to discuss that. I think it would be very limited. I think the main thing we'd look at is really those students with health conditions would be the primary area in which cell phone use would be allowed. Yeah, I think that would be the case. I'm trying to think of good examples because we haven't had to really go down that road, but.
Paul, I know that when this came up in committee, you were talking you mentioned like service animals.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that would be, I found that helpful to have you explain that a little bit, that it's a rare.
Right.
Yeah, and I think it is rare, and I think we'll learn, over time and when the requests come in. The real bottom line is what it would be looked at is like an accommodation in an IEP to accommodate or change what is the rules or policies of the district as a result of the disability. And the real key decision about that is it required for the student with a disability to receive FAPE, which is a free and appropriate public education? And there's a line there. If, for example, if a student, that's why it's hard to come up with an example, but if they have goals and objectives in the area of reading and decoding, someone would have to make a case that if the student is not allowed to have a phone, they can't make adequate progress towards their goals and objectives in the area of reading without the phone. And I don't know that would happen in that case. But that would be what we'd be looking at. Is it required for the student to receive equal access to the educational material being presented to them, or to receive an appropriate education by the district?
Mm-hmm.
So really two determiners here, the IEP team, and it would have to be based upon, the educational need of the student. But I will also share with you from years of experience when we make a significant change, as you're looking at tonight, you will see a considerable uptick, and you alluded to it, Paul, in anxiety from a doctor. And you will get maybe a 504 type situation where, okay, I have a note from my doctor saying I need to have my cell phone on me because of the anxiety that I have. And so that's some of the things that we are gonna have to be, if we go to the bell-to-bell route, that's another thing that will pop up that we will be having to deal with, guaranteed.
Really quick.
I'd like to add on to that really quick. I don't think that having your phone would benefit.
I'm not,
And I can attest to that.
I don't either, but I mean, I'm just saying
It
that,
definitely would come up, and I'm sure a multitude of other conditions that people require their cell phone for as well.
Yep.
So I do appreciate you recognizing
yep.
Yeah,
the,
and
that we'll need to,
potential.
yeah,
yeah,
the potential
yeah.
issues and concerns with that.
Yeah, and the one thing that's pretty standard in kind of in special ed and with supported, through case law is that, like, a physician cannot, like, recommend or prescribe what happens within the school district. We need, our obligation is to consider that recommendation and then apply that based on the expertise of the professionals within the educational team to make that decision. So they can't just straight out prescribe it and we have to do it. With that in really in any situation, we have certain criteria that we have to walk through to see if it's something that's required for us to do.
Awesome, that really helps me understand this a lot better, so thank you very much.
Did you have any?
I can comment, I think,
Yeah,
if
go
that's
ahead.
okay. So, I can't remember if it was Mason or Ainsley that brought up that face-to-face interaction. Do you prefer going by your first names, or do you prefer Miss?
No, yeah, that's
Okay, thank you. That face-to-face interaction and that culture, professionally, this is an area where new joiners at the firm, my last firm that I was at, incredibly adept and effective working in a digital environment. They fell apart in front of clients. Fell apart. Like, they're having an issue. I was like, well, did you have a coffee? Like, this is some pretty basic stuff, guys. And so I just greatly appreciate that and think that that's a real hope that we could help improve with improve policy, actually improving outcomes. I do have some concerns. Like Director Lauer, I ran this by my 16-year-old who was not super excited to talk to me afterwards.
Did you do it in person or was it through?
That was in person. However, I had the same experience yesterday when I was reading the policy. I was literally reading the policy, and I got a ding on my phone with a thing while she was in class about something she wanted to buy. And I was like, well, that's an automatic no. So she's going to kill me twice now when I get home. But anyways, so I share some of the same experience, so I appreciate you sharing that, Director Lauer. So some of the concerns that I have is, some pretty minor stuff, like my elementary school kid is required to bring headphones to school. As that's on their list that every kid has to bring their own headphones. So I don't know if that portion needs to be updated to say, dumb headphones are okay, or basic headphones, or non-connectivity headphones, whatever. Questions about students that are doing PSEO, and how do we handle students that are on school site but doing non-school that may have a secondary requirement what is their teachers that are using in remote learning or other things like that, and how do we handle that? When my eldest was in GATE, they were required to bring headphones because so much of their classwork was, because they were in asynchronous education mode, so much of their education was done through devices and headphones. So some consideration there for some of that. Director Kelsenberg, I know we're not supposed to direct people directly. I was surprised not to hear anything about bus time. And what is, this policy does not include bus time other than for school-related events, but doesn't count the commute time. And I'm curious what we think about the commute time. I have some concerns whether we should allow that also recognize that when my middle was going through riding the bus, her bus ride was 45 minutes or maybe more. And so opportunity to do homework and things like that was super helpful. And so I don't want to restrict that, I don't think, but I just want to have that conversation, especially for K through, at least K through 5, if not K through 8, of limiting phone use on the bus. There's some conversations I'm not quite ready to have with my 7-year-old. In general, I was leaning towards bell-to-bell for similar thoughts as most people, that I think that phones are, and I think I shared this last meeting, I think phones are, they're infectious. So if you're doing it one place, other people are going to be getting the messages and getting the pressure to be using theirs in other classrooms, and that's just going to create more and more pressure. And alleviating that community pressure, I think, is just is very helpful. So that is where I'm overall leaning, and I do really hope that this can help with just some of the outcomes, non-particularly academic outcomes, but some of the other outcomes that we hope that our students can gain, such as interpersonal relationships, better mental health, and better problem solving, to be quite frank. So that's
Thank
me.
you very much. Can I just say, we did, those are excellent examples, but those are things that did come up with our committee, like even things like journalism school. I mean, there will be kind of exceptions to certain things that we'll have to address. So
But
thank
in many
you
of
for
those
reiterating that, because like ALC, you know, need to look at transitions program that has outside employment during the school day and ALC. So we will need to further dialogue about those related to policy.
Oh, one other question I had. Sorry, can I go a third time? All right, sorry. At some meetings, we have reviewed procedures related to policy. What is when do we bring procedures to the board, and when do we not bring procedures to the board? This seems like one where procedures might matter. So how do we make that determination? And I assume that this will come back to the board.
Procedures will be reviewed by the board sometime later this spring, if you go bell to bell. Either way, I mean, whatever. I mean, I can say what we're doing right now is pretty much option 2 there. So if we go to option 1, you will, after the board sets a direction, the administrative team will get a chance to take a look at a variety of different options, and we will develop procedures, and then it's not only for the board, but it's for the public. Here's what, we're going to be doing expectation-wise moving forward.
Good discussions, everyone. This has been really helpful, and special thanks to our student reps. I mean, it's really great to get the insight to help share the voice of the students, but I really appreciate you always being willing to share your own thoughts and opinions as well. I think that's super helpful. And we all know, there's one thing to be at the meeting, but there's a lot of work that happens outside the meeting, so I know you guys put in a lot of work, so thank you both. So anytime I have to make a big decision, I always kind of think, like, what is my North Star? And, and for me in this role, it's been about the kids. It's trying to best serve all students, with fidelity. And, sometimes, though, it's helpful to have a compass. And for me, it kind of forces me to look back at the strategic plan, the PONY plan. And, on the website, it's developed by students, families, teachers, staff. I mean, it's a really good way of kind of getting the insight of the community. And some of those main takeaways is, they want, parents and families and students want engaging relative learning experiences. They want personal connections and opportunities for kids to find their place, and they want to belong. And so I think as we look at this policy, yet smartphones offer the round-the-clock distraction and social media access. And, Director Parker, as you referenced it, briefly today, but also at a previous meeting, that really I took away from it is this, electronic devices are highly addictive and contagious. And I think that's a really great way of kind of looking at that. And, excess smartphones, any studies that you look at, among youth is linked to increased anxiety, depression, hindrance to academic instruction and learning, and other mental health issues. But yet we have an opportunity and the responsibility as a school board to do what we feel is best for students. And for me, I think it's important to, and I'll be supporting option 1 for the bell to bell.
Thank you. Thank you. Superintendent Funk, it would, as we start crafting these policies, I always say, and I know the board feels the same way, it's how do we measure the impact? Would it be possible to come back with, like, I think of one advantage to this policy, the option one, is we know that there are extreme behaviors in our school. And a lot of it can be related back to the technology and the devices. I mean, might we be able to look at like referrals, behavioral referrals?
Yeah, from a longitudinal, it would take a couple years to do it, but we have some data, behavioral data. I think we could do a survey of students. We could do a survey of staff, a year from now.
Yeah.
And really, look at student engagement. We could, you get Minnesota Student Survey, that's again more longer term.
Right.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely some benchmarks that we could evaluate that would tell you about the effectiveness of it.
And one thing I appreciated when you started this conversation, and a lot of districts, I want to give our administrative team credit because, and our fellow directors here, to be quite honest, too, because a lot of school districts just said, this is what we're going to do. They didn't take the time to talk to students, talk to teachers, talk to community members. And while there isn't going to be universal agreement, I think that there is a lot that we can agree on. And so I think that even the community would like to, if this is a joint effort, this is a joint effort by, it's not just teachers, it's at family members at home. And so to share any kind of results or data that we can, link to this policy would be something that I think the whole community could feel proud of, our students could feel proud of. And just, again, as we try to move that needle, not only academically, but behaviorally, social, emotionally, and just even making life easier for our teachers. That's a big part of why I'm going to be supporting option one. Is it's very clear that it's not working as we have it now. It's kind of very ambiguous for teachers to navigate. So to have that clarity, I think will be quite helpful. I am very mindful when I talk to my son that this is, the implementation is going to be, good luck with that. I don't know how you're going to meet all those challenges. I'll be excited to see what you come back with, but it's going to be challenging because I think there's going to be people wanting to work around the system. But I feel very strongly that given the evidence that when you know better, you kind of do better. And I think this is one of those times where it's gone a little too far. The pendulum has swung so far, and we're seeing some of the negative outcomes.
Well, Dr. Agbamu, who's in charge of, the secondary in the district, has assured me she will have this thing fully implemented and ready to go.
But I agree with everyone's comments here in terms of the strategic plan and the culture we want to create and the challenges with our students and staff. And something that was new today was, and I think it was you, Ainsley, that said it's the engagement, the extracurriculars and the activities. Mm-hmm. I really think that that's a new angle that we really haven't talked about. So I appreciated that. That really resonated with me because in the blink of an eye, your high school years are gone by. And if you're just on your phone and you're not engaged in we have, as a district, one of our strengths, I feel like, is the clubs and the opportunities to engage. And so to know that that's not really being accessed is kind of heartbreaking. So I hope this helps too with that. So thank you again. Okay. Is there anyone with like a different opinion? In terms of, I know that, a lot of this is going to be in the procedural piece, but from a policy perspective, I know you hadn't made up your mind.
I like the idea if you can rope it all in and then admin can feed it back out as they see necessary. Actually, I am leaning toward the option two because I'm just thinking of the reality. Great, let's bell to bell, no phones. I would love for that to be in place and to work. Mm-hmm. But will it work? So do we need to just give it a little bit of room? A kid going between class, phones are part of life now. When I went to school, we didn't have phones. So sure, we could get by without phones, but it wasn't an option. But now everybody has phones. And there's also a part of learning to navigate life with a phone, because that will be part of your adulthood. And if you have them in passing time, hopefully you won't use it, but you might need to put an assignment on your calendar, or quick look up something for class the next hour. So I do want that considered. I'm not saying it has to be that way, but, you know, we got another meeting's worth. I'll think this through and I'll get it to you, but I am leaning toward 2.
Oh, and I wanted to touch on that, and this also kind of goes back to Director Parker's point of, I'm a PSEO student, so my 5th hour is my PSEO class. And during that time, I also work on like student council stuff. And you know, it's really a lot, some of that is, you know, just like texting our group chat and sending them reminders about like, what's going on. And it's really easy and nice to just like be able to check in with all of our members and, you know, this is what's going on. And we have a week coming up, our blast week is coming up, and there's so much to be done. And, you know, phones are how we communicate with each other, and just, yep, this is getting done by this person, this is getting done by this person, and it works really easy. So I do understand that point of option too.
I will say, I agree with that completely. But they do have their Chromebooks too. I mean, there are other means of communicating. And I would hope that some of that, you know, would turn into face-to-face communication too. You know, maybe now you get together as a group. You've got a group chat going, get together as a group. You know, I mean, it's not always practical, but I mean, it maybe creates opportunities.
I just want to touch on that. At our student council meeting, when we were talking about cell phone policy, I was trying to bring back email culture, back when everybody would email everybody, and there would be like Google email group chats, and so just bring back email culture, because you can communicate through other platforms. So yeah.
And I do think that that's a good point. It's going to be, you know, retraining to utilize email more for, even for parents and guardians to utilize email, not have that. And it's going to be kind of a change. And I think that a couple parents at the board table have said it's going to be a behavior change for families too. But I think that if we're in it together, which is what I kind of appreciate that staff did in this isn't just a school board or school issue. This is broader. This is a community issue. And as Director Parker said, it's a future employment issue. I mean, and then that is a great charge that we have, is that academic outcomes and that the skills, soft and hard skills that we're teaching, and how maybe technology is just getting in the way a little bit to that.
Can I throw one more thought as we're talking about these emails? I feel like shifting to more of an email culture has benefits as well, because it really does set boundaries on when you are going to be working on something. Like one of my boundaries is my email for the board doesn't go on my phone. I just sit down and do my board work on email. And that helps me not be pulled away from everything else in my life, because phones are so easy, and if it bings, then you have an email, so or a text or whatever. So it just kind of naturally puts in those boundaries. And in terms of learning how to deal with phones in real life, is having those boundaries. When you're working, and when you're living, you're living. So I think that is a benefit that I hadn't thought of until you guys are all talking about it. So anyway. Anyone else?
Yes.
One question, just as a new board member, I don't know this portion. Why is it important to have the reference to the cyberbullying in this policy? I assume it's already in policy elsewhere when it says the references down below to the.
From MSBA.
Okay, from MSBA says we should have cyberbullying. Does that cause us any conflict or issue to have bullying in two different or multiple different locations?
I think it's listed within bullying.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, we can, yeah, it should be the same, but we could double check it and make sure the language doesn't conflict or.
Just want to make sure that,
Yeah.
I didn't know if there's any problems with having it in two locations or, okay, thank you.
So what I'm sensing, I mean, we're not voting on anything, but it does give the committee and our staff direction to pursue option 1. I want to respect your opinion, but it seems like everyone else is kind of in an option 1 camp. So I think that staff, if you could take that and we'll move forward both, independently with, but also with the committee on the policy. But hopefully this gives you some direction to start thinking about those procedural pieces that were, this is one of those things that we have a great policy and boots on the ground, you're gonna experience it very differently maybe than we have, than we hope here. So just keep that feedback loop and that communication loop. Great.
Great.
Thank you. Great discussion. I appreciate it. Thank you to our students who, this is why you're at the table. We really appreciate that perspective. And I know that we all have, everyone at this table has the best intentions. So I think we're keeping the strategic plan and the pony plan in focus. And so thank you for the conversation. Great. We'll come back with a second read and then ultimately a third read on this as well. And moving on to our next agenda item. This is under Strategic Direction D, which is developing strong partnerships with the communities we serve. And we're going to turn it over to Superintendent Funk for the first update, which is a federal programs update.
Yeah, one of these is just a statement. They're actually both statements, but they're related to things that are happening right now at the federal level and how those things may be impacting us here at the district level here in Stillwater. So the first one is a statement from the superintendent on student safety amid increased ICE activity. As superintendent, I want to assure our students, families, and staff that our schools remain safe and welcoming places for all learners, regardless of their background or immigration status. We understand that the recent increase in immigration and customs enforcement ICE activity has caused fear and uncertainty in our community. Please know that our district is committed to protecting the rights of all students and maintaining a learning environment free from intimidation or disruption. Schools are places of learning, and we will continue to work with legal experts and community partners to support affected families. We encourage anyone with concerns to reach out to our counselors, our family engagement specialists, or trusted staff members for guidance and resources. The second statement is on the potential closing of the Department of Education. The potential closure of the United States Department of Education would have an impact on public schools across the country, including ours. Federal funding, policies, and programs help ensure equitable access to education, support students with disabilities, and provide essential resources for teachers and schools. The loss of this department could create uncertainty around these critical services, placing greater burdens on state and local systems. Regardless of any changes at the federal level, our district remains committed to providing a high-quality education to every student. We will continue to advocate for the resources and policies needed to support our students, our families, and our educators. So, I just read in the news here within the last couple of hours that they are putting procedures in place to significantly weaken the department. The Department of Education is been created by an act of Congress. I think what we're seeing happen is they're going to try to shift a lot of the responsibilities that are currently under the Department of Education to other entities, which then causes significant confusion for those of us in public education as far as systems to go through. So, but I think in this time of change and uncertainty, I think it's important for the public to know that we are going to maintain the course with as steady hand as possible, and working together, we'll get through this. So that's my statement on the federal situation and the update.
Just for perspective, and I don't have the exact number, and I don't know that you would either, but do you know the percent of our budget that is federal funding?
6-7% maybe. I would
Okay.
5 to 7. Yeah.
Okay, 5 to
So-
7%.
Yeah, vast majority of our
State and
funding
local.
comes from the state and local.
But
But-
it still would be a loss of funding and those responsibilities then.
Well, it's
fall on
not
us.
just the loss of funding, it's, okay, where do we go
Right.
for the funding? And so, it's just creating a level of, potentially creating a level of confusion that currently doesn't exist.
Thank you. Director Parker?
I guess that raises the concern is even if we lose short-term, so we can go get it somewhere else potentially, but even if we lose 20 to 25% of that funding for even a short-term basis, that would put us at risk of,
Yeah, I don't see it, I don't see us losing funding. I just think it's more of a, how to access it. And so, and again, I think right now we are seeing a fight in the courts saying to the president, you can't pause funding. These are already congressionally approved programs. This is where working with the Department of Education, I think they could help us be held harmless while they work it out. But again, it's creating extra complexity that we shouldn't have to work through. But that's where we have to work with our local partners, I think, to make sure that we're not exposed to this. Because if we were to say, okay, we're going to lose a percentage of our money, I mean, you look at that throughout the country. I mean, that would be talking major chaos within school systems nationwide. And haven't not heard anything like that yet, but I'm raising this as a concern that decisions that are made in DC have potential impacts here at the community level.
Thank you, and that's kind of a segue to our legislative update, state update. Did you have an update on that, or?
On the legislature?
Yeah.
I do. I had 19 slides till Carissa closed it way down. So legislative update, odd year. We thank you all for your attendance to legislative breakfast last on Friday morning. We
had a great turnout.
Yeah, it was excellent. So the House of Representatives still does not have a quorum. I do not expect them to have a quorum for quite some time, it sounds like. So all the activity that committee-wise and bills-wise is all Senate-focused. So today I'm going to really talk 3 bills with you that are all at different early stages within the Senate. So go to the next slide. First one is READ Act, okay? And there's been some key changes that are proposed for literacy education moving forward. Next slide. So we all know it requires a science-based reading instruction. It gets rid of ineffective methods, and some people can talk through 3Qing. I don't know what that is, but it gets rid of 3Qing. Expands teacher and paraprofessional learning, training, and it strengthens assessment and intervention strategies. Next slide. So it requires structured literacy training for teachers, literacy leads, and specialists, and we are going through that. We've been different stages of it for the last 3 years, really, and now we are well into it as a complete staff here this year with our professional development days. This one, I think, is new. Mandates professional development for paraprofessionals providing Tier 2 interventions. So they're going to have to go through some sort of training on this. And then we have to make sure whatever materials we have and are utilizing, they're culturally responsive. Next. We have the Department of Education is required to approve a list of evidence-based curricula, which they are constantly updating. We have to approve literacy screeners. There's going to be, if this becomes law, there'll be 15 evidence-based literacy intervention models that have been identified by July 2025, and our local plan must be aligned with whatever the state-approved assessments are by MCAs. It carries through the University of Minnesota that they are no longer going to be partnering with MDE on it. MDE is going to be taking full responsibility as of July 1. The modifications take place, and then in November, we'll see the final list of literacy intervention models published. So the key takeaway here for me is we're going to continue to identify curriculum at the state level, where we are well on the way towards identifying here that's on that approved curriculum on the list. And then we're expanding the training to include paras who work with students in reading or literacy. So that's the first real READ Act change on the Senate side. And again, the House, there's nothing at this point. Yes?
Does any of that come with any funding?
They didn't say anything, there was no funding mentioned. No, there was no funding mentioned.
Okay.
Good question.
Details.
Actually, just help me understand, if this all happens in the Senate, nothing happens unless it's also,
Correct, and the governor's got to approve it. Yep. Okay, this is an interesting one. Parental curriculum review and consent. And again, this goes back to, you mentioned policies earlier, Parker. This would go back to, if this passes, this will have a significant impact on some of our curricular policies. Next, 753 modifies the requirements for parental curriculum review rights, and it requires written consent for sexual education instruction. So parents would have to sign off if their kids want to receive sexual education in school. Parents, guardians, and adult students can review all instructional materials. Again, I want to point this out. Parents, guardians, and adult students. It does not say any member of the community. They have to have some sort of connection to the district.
And that is in our current policy.
That's in our policy now, so that's consistent with what we're doing. This would include textbooks, videos, online resources, and printed content. We must provide copies upon request, and we can arrange alternative instruction if they object to content. This is pretty consistent with what our current policy is. Schools cannot provide sexual education to minors without parental consent, and parents and guardians must provide written approval for students to participate. And then it increases parental control over sensitive curriculum topics. I wouldn't say control, but oversight. And control if they don't want to take it, I suppose. And this would be, if it passed, start of the 2025 school year.
Yep.
Right now, so that would be, you have to opt in. Right now, it's opt out.
Correct.
Right? So, I mean, it's just kind of
Yep.
Just going back a slide to that third, do we have any sense of what that means? Increasing parental control?
Means that my kids don't have to do it. It's not mandated. It's not opting out. It's opting in. So parents have more control. Okay, I have to opt my student out if I don't want them to see this.
Oh, that's part of the whole, okay,
Yep.
okay, it's not like a, okay.
So there would have to be some thought in how those processes would work and how those procedures would work, because it is, like you said, a total flip. So could require time and staff, manpower to
Figure it out.
figure that out. I would also like to say this, though, does make me incredibly proud of the work that we've done on parental and guardian and adult student engagement in our materials. I think that we do a really good job. Just tooting our own horn, I think we do. I think we do offer a lot of opportunity for parents to be aware and engaged, whether it's the curriculum open house that we had, or the recent policy work that you were intimately involved in, so.
Okay, next one. This applies to you. Modifying open meeting law for remote participation for 2025. It amends the Minnesota open meeting law, allows unlimited remote participation in government meetings. Interactive and technology must allow all participants to see and hear each other. At least one member must be physically present at the main location. All votes must be conducted via roll call. So what it does get rid of is it gets rid of there used to be a requirement, you can only do it 3 times a year remotely. You'd have to say what your address and location were. Gets rid of all of that, and really we would just have to have one person here and where the site of the meeting is, and the rest of you could be in different places to route wherever. So this really relaxes the pretty stringent requirements. And they relaxed them to a large degree during COVID, and I'm really surprised. I thought this was going to pass last year, and I'm really surprised it's really taken this long to get this updated. So this is coming back again. Yes?
Does this update the, I don't want to be pejorative, the rather silly requirement of those in remote locations have to make arrangements for people to be
Yes.
present?
Correct.
Okay.
It does. So
So
that
you
you
don't
don't
have to
even
be in
have
a
to give,
hotel lobby.
you don't even have to give your location.
Okay.
So I can remember, this was probably 10 years ago. I had a school board member beaming in from a hut in Tahiti in the middle of the water. And good luck finding that location. But she had the name of the resort and, on there. So, yeah, so this really makes things much more consistent with the tools we have available. It simplifies things quite a bit, so.
Would the access for the public in this situation be that, where that one person has to be here, that's still where the public has the right to
Correct.
go to? Would they also have that same right to the remote?
No.
Okay.
No, the meeting location is here, the main location. This is where the public would come. So you don't have to keep your hotel room door open or, I mean,
I was thinking the online portion.
nope, it would be here.
Okay.
Yeah, they must be notified of the meeting location that some members might be participating via interactive technology.
Any other questions? Thank you for those updates. Appreciate it. Okay. That's the last item we have on the agenda. So with that, we're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.